So now the land ended at Dover, and the battleground of the air began wherever radar spotted an enemy plane. Radar, developed by two Birmingham University professors on a Scotsman's hunch, was a primitive tool in those days. But no lynx could see so far, and certainly no human. It was a long time before it could report the height of a plane. For the moment, though, it could locate the direction and the size of an oncoming force, such as this one, which marked the first change of tactics after Britain chose to go it alone. Now Hitler left the coasts and made his first daylight attack inland. It was the start of his plan to destroy these men and the line of defense they manned, the Royal Air Force. These are the Spitfires, and they had one unchanging task: to break up the formation of bombers and pick them off one by one. The observers on the coast would spot the formation, relay its position to an air control center, which in turn alerted the fighters and the ack-ack. Later, when the proximity fuse came in, it was easy to see in the early ack-ack gun the most archaic weapon of the Second War. It peppered the sky around a pilot. Its record of hits was lamentable, but neither side knew this at the time. And it did keep the bombers high and confuse their aim, and it rattled the discipline of the pilots, whose essential job was to hold formation and so bring a massive fire to bear on the British fighters. Here is the complex but classic pattern of the dogfight. The fighter on the tail of a bomber. He misses and peels away. Several Spitfires come after the German fighters, the Messerschmitt 109. He fires and downs one. The Spitfires attack the main bomber formation, and one of them attracts a Messerschmitt, who chases him and knocks him out. And the Messerschmitt performs the victory roll, the pilot's traditional little jig signifying a kill. As long as the bomber formation holds, the Spitfire's mission is never accomplished. They come back and back. And here one picks off another Messerschmitt. And it is the Spitfire's turn to do the victory roll, while the German pilot bails out in the channel. Very early on, the Germans were remarkably accurate at locating a stranded pilot and were quick to pick him up. A British pilot bailed out onto English soil. A captured German was lost to the Luftwaffe forever. Pretty soon, the fighter stations developed a daily routine. The return to base, the clocking in of the lucky ones, the exchange of anecdotes, and the tally of the day's kill. Sometimes there was visible evidence of the plane shot down, but more often you relied on the judgment of a pilot, the enthusiasm of the spotters, and the ack-ack batteries. The war had come with a bang to the Air Force, and this round of daily danger and nightly inquests was its whole world. Behind the flyers was the larger, quieter world of the civilian and his preoccupation with invasion. Every night, the day's reconnaissance photographs of the occupied French coast brought into sharper focus the progress of the German invasion bases. Barges, new railroads laid down, supply depots restocked, the material proof that Hitler was rightly quoted when he set the date for the middle of September. Against this inevitable day, every man, the high and the humble, had a particular job to do: to mark out the ground defenses, to maintain every form of transport if the railways were knocked out. There was even a home guard taxi squad. By now, the local defense volunteers had turned into the home guard, and they would learn everything from firefighting to machine gun training and the uses of the Sten gun. The women now moved into military jobs, which in the First War would have been reserved for the fit but middle-aged serviceman. In August, Hitler tried a stroke of melodrama. A mock invasion force dropped leaflets offering a last appeal to reason. He set off no terror, but only a wave of rumors, informed guesses, and confidential nonsense which brought forth a crisp official reminder. And then the Germans proposed a new gambit. They sent over their fighters, the Messerschmitts, in the hope of baiting the Spitfires and exhausting their fuel before the bombers arrived. The gambit was refused. Air Vice Marshal Park, who was the commander of the main fighter group, ordered the Spitfires to patrol, but not to intercept. The Germans brought up a small bomber force to make a feint attack on the coast. Still no interference from the Spitfires. They were held back and they trusted to the fast improving radar to detect the main German force. And this was it. And the Spitfires took off in the new confidence of knowing that they maneuvered better than the Messerschmitts. They could stay longer in the air. They had a battery of 8 guns against the Messerschmitt's 4. It was the dogfight again, but it was also the true beginning of the Blitz. Between the 16th and 18th of August, something like 500 or 600 aircraft attacked and damaged aerodromes and radar installations at Biggin Hill, Manston, Westmoreland, Gosport, Kenley, Rochester, Tangmere, and Northolt. The battle had begun fiercely but correctly against military targets. The cities belonged to the citizens, and the capital city fed them diversion and good cheer. The Germans, too, helped morale, though not by design, by broadcasting the comments of a renegade.
Germany calling, Germany calling, Germany calling. Here are the Reichs under ambush. Station Bremen and Station DXB on the 31-meter band.
He was intended to cow the British with his all-knowing mind. In fact, he contributed much to the gaiety of the nation. A monotonous theme of Lord Haw Haw was the terror of the Stuka dive bomber. Goering was not quite so lyrical about it. It had taken a terrible beating from the Spitfires at Dunkirk. But it took several big Stuka raids over coastal towns to bring him to the reluctant conclusion that it was an expensive and handicapped weapon against strong fighter opposition. It was nearly 100 miles an hour slower than the Hurricane. It was deficient in armor plate. It was slower than the Spitfire in the dive, and it never seemed to get enough protection. Screaming over the heads of unprotected infantry or scrambling refugees, it was a demon. Up against the Spitfires, its faults were demonstrable, and the price it paid in machines and men could be reckoned in scenes such as these. The Stuka pilots were as good as they come. But when they lived to tell their story, it was always the same. Murderous damage to the tail, the natural consequence of having one rear gun against the Spitfire's 8. As early as the end of July, Goering had finished all the ground and air preparations in France for the air battle of Britain. He promised Hitler he would achieve air superiority in a week, and he laid down how it was to be done: to master the RAF in the air, to destroy their airfields, to demolish the plane factories. The German crews were briefed accordingly. The RAF briefing was simple: down the Germans. The defender had another advantage over the attacker. Here was a unique battle headquarters, controlling tactics, plotting the positions of the enemy, directing the fighters, continuously in touch with their own men in the air. Astonishingly enough, the Germans never had ground-to-air communication throughout the Battle of Britain. A German pilot was briefed on the ground. Once he was in the air, he was on his own. But on his own, he was a formidable man. Following Goering's precise orders, the destruction of airfields and factories, the absolute prerequisite, as Hitler put it, before the invasion of Britain could begin. The plans for invasion were supposed to be finished by August the 15th, but it was a famous day for other reasons. On that day, Goering fatally decided that radar stations were too difficult to demolish. As a consequence, they went on improving all the time, and so increasingly refined the work of the nerve center. A new tactic of raiding from Norway across the North Sea ran by sheer fluke into 7 squadrons of Spitfires and Hurricanes that had gone to the north for refitting. The raid was pulverized by the usual ex-bookkeepers and youngsters from the schools and slums, whom Hitler called the young lords.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
They were soon joined by carefree or vengeful volunteers from the United States, Poland, the Commonwealth, from France, Czechoslovakia, the Netherlands, and Norway. The 24th of August saw this very strange scene: the loading of a Wellington bomber for a visit to foreign parts, for a raid on Berlin, no less. A decision that stuck in the gullet of some of the Air Force commanders, almost as much as Hitler's offer of peace had stuck in the gullet of Mr. Churchill. But the decision was made, and for better or worse, it was done. 80 of these Wellington bombers were to throw the Blitz in reverse, if only for one night. They took off at dusk. And next morning they had electrified the British people and outraged the Fuhrer. Stung by this reprisal, which underlined the delay in the invasion, Hitler on the 4th of September answered his own misgivings. If the English cry, why doesn't he come? My answer is, be patient. He will come for sure. And if they say they will bomb our cities, then I say we shall wipe their cities off the map. So one retaliation begat another, and goaded Hitler into the supreme reprisal, the decision to begin the Blitz on London. It was the day the civilians had braced themselves for. But for the RAF it was, in retrospect, a new lease on survival. For Hitler was abandoning Goering's successful strategy of first immobilizing the factories and destroying the fighter stations and airfields. The temptation was irresistible to aim too soon at the heart of Britain, to try for a grand slam and dislocate the government and paralyze the capital. laid the fuse the day after his speech with a raid on Thameshaven, an oil farm at the mouth of the river. By night, its glare would be a beacon to the oncoming bombers. By day, they would always have the wriggling arrow of the Thames itself to guide them. 2 days after this fire, reconnaissance reports from the Spitfires disclosed invasion barges at Calais and Dunkirk. For several weeks, the Spitfires had been tracking the invasion train all the way from Hamburg and Bremen to Ostend and Flushing, and finally to Brest and Calais. On the 6th, the British government issued an invasion alert. It was not quite so pressing as that, for none of us knew at the time that a week before, Goering had confessed to a pensive Hitler that he had not yet won air mastery over Britain. Give him 2 or 3 days over London, he said, and he would achieve it then. It was at this conference that Hitler agreed to the Blitz on London.